Good morning, everybody. Today I'll be refuting Jesse's claim that Nephilims are intelligent extraterrestrials that also have inhabited Earth. The three supporting claims that he used were in King James version of the Bible. Nephilims were mentioned various times throughout over 10 books in the Holy Bible. 2 is the story of David and Goliath, and 3 are archaeological findings. I'll start by saying that the Bible is not a factual source of information, but a book that is used and has been used for centuries to spread the teachings of a certain religion. If you're going to use the Bible as a reference for factual information, then you would have to accept the book in its entirety as factual. To quote a verse from the King James Bible, Revelation 12:9, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." In this instance, the devil is referred to as a dragon and serpent. We have seen endless representations of the devil, such as a red man with horns. This is just one of them. Passages in the Bible can be interpreted in many different ways, but do not make a strong argument to prove the existence of a being. The quote from Genesis that was used during Jesse's presentation stated, "The Nephilim were on earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare to them the same mighty men which of old, men of renown." That verse actually reads, Genesis 6:4, "There were giants on the earth." There were giants on the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare to them the same mighty men which were of old, men renowned. So it wasn't the word Nephilim that was used, it was giants. The mentioning of giants in stories does not prove that Nephilims exist nor have ever existed. This leads me to my next claim, which was the story of David and Goliath. Once again, the Bible is not a book of facts to just pick reliable information out of. Jesse mentions that David was an average man that would battle with God by his side, and Goliath, the giant, could have been several feet taller than David. Let's use that and compare people today. Take an average male height, for example. The average height for men is 5 feet 10 inches, or about 1.78 meters, according to a study performed by Dr. Stephen Hall. If you look at the current players in the NBA, the tallest player is 7'3", as seen in the list made by the publication The Richest. With a good list of other players, not too much shorter than that. Robert Pershing Wadlow measured in at 8 feet and 11 inches. That's the gentleman you see from the old black and white pictures with the glasses, and he's pretty much 2 humans. All right, according to Guinness World Records. This evidence shows that throughout our history, including currently, there have been abnormally large humans to exist, but not proving there are Nephilims, just taller and larger than average humans. The last claim that was used is archaeological findings. Jesse referred to an archaeologist named Julio C. Tello, who was an active archaeologist from 1919 to around 1939. The evidence is outdated and the artifacts have been revisited. Tello discovered a very large graveyard in the desert peninsula of Paracas of Peru. He would end up discovering what would be named the Paracas skulls. These skulls are large and have an elongated cranial structure, larger than any other normal human. According to ancientorigins.net, the Paracas skulls' DNA have been tested and have been found to date back as far as 2,000 years and had European and Middle Eastern origins. None of this points towards the existence of an extraterrestrial being, but possibly an ancient and unique civilization of humans. There have always been different cultures and unique individuals born, whether due to medical reasons or natural adaptations. This is one of them. All in all, the evidence provided is not sufficient enough to prove that intelligent extraterrestrial beings exist, let alone have inhabited our planet. The Bible never uses the name Nephilim in any of its passages, but does refer to giants, in which I mentioned some walk among us today. The archaeological findings that were presented have more recently been tested and have found to have traces of European and Middle Eastern origin, which would make them come from Earth.
All right, Max, I like that you went right after the premises that the advocate is going with the use of the Bible as historical information. I think you kind of challenged with an example about how there is exaggeration or it's up to interpretation, that there in fact could be a variety of explanations for what's presented there. And it doesn't necessarily lead to the notion that these are, Nephilims as they are referred to. And it doesn't even suggest that they are aliens. There's nothing in the biblical references that you talk about. The one section where you have the same quote from the King James Bible and the language is slightly different. I don't know that gets you much in the long run, except that it shows that people have read those phrases differently. And if that's the argument that you're making, then that fits in with the general premise that you have. Otherwise, I'm not exactly sure that it gets you that much. The David and Goliath analogy I thought was pretty effective. I like the way you went at this. You just said, there is nothing amazing about tall people, that they are. We find them, the average person nowadays is, what you said, 5'10". The average man is now 5'10". My guess is that they were shorter in the past, but that doesn't mean that you didn't have tall people still in the past. And any significant difference, would be perceived as somebody being, a giant per se. And you had several examples that you could point to. You mentioned the NBA players. You mentioned the Guinness Book of World Records. I think that you come back and you say, okay, so large humans existed. How does that prove that these are Nephilims or that they are angels or that they are aliens or any of those kinds of things? We don't have any evidence to prove that anything other than that there were big people at some point in time, according to the Bible. So I think that that's a very reasonable challenge on that. And you kind of explain why the advocate's argument is not a reasonable inference to make as a consequence. And then the part about the archaeology, I appreciated the fact that I got a little context for it. Suddenly I'm going, okay, so we're talking about some guy who was active almost 100 years ago. That his data basically comes down to these oversized skulls, and then we've got updated information that says, yeah, the DNA indicates that they were European and Middle Eastern. I'm going, well, that seems to settle this idea, it's not Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls. We're not dealing with aliens kind of stuff. We had a bunch of big-headed people at one point. That's pretty straightforward. But that doesn't prove the existence of aliens. It doesn't prove the existence of Nephilims. It doesn't do any of those kinds of things. And by the way, I'm sorry, isn't most of the historical record of the Bible set in the Middle East and not in South America? Yeah, so that might be something that you would want to mention also. The only evidence that he cites is on a completely different continent, which is not documented in the source that he cites in the first point. So there's an inconsistency there too. But I thought you did a very good job. It was very direct, and you cited some. You sometimes have to be creative about the evidence that you find. It's not like you're always going to find a study that goes with the opposite direction. Sometimes you have to look at the information from a broader perspective and say, well, what else might apply here? What else is relevant? What else would count in favor of or maybe weigh against something? And is there information that I could use there to help me find some responses? And I always appreciate when people make an extra effort to do that sort of thing. All right, thank you.